Some record-breaking dreams shine bright with hope and ambition, yet sometimes they demand the ultimate price. In this video, we explore 5 of the most disturbing and tragic deaths that occurred in the pursuit of extraordinary feats, stories of passion, risk, and the fragile line between triumph and tragedy. On October 12, 2002, the clear blue waters off Bahia Hibi Beach in the Dominican Republic became the stage for a tragic moment in freediving. Audrey Mestre, an elite athlete at the very peak of her career, entered the ocean in pursuit of a world record that would test the limits of human endurance and skill. Just days earlier, she had pushed herself to depths few had ever reached, and the diving world watched with anticipation as she prepared for a new milestone. What unfolded that day, however, would end in devastating loss and raise troubling questions that still echo through the sport. Audrey was born in Saint-Denis, France, into a family deeply connected to the water. She began swimming as a baby, later becoming an accomplished scuba diver by her early teens. After her family moved to Mexico City, she pursued marine biology studies in La Paz, combining her academic interest in the ocean with her passion for diving. In 1996, she met renowned freediver Francisco Pepin Ferreras, whose mentorship soon became a partnership. Moving to Miami to be with him, Audrey devoted herself to mastering the extreme discipline of no-limits freediving, where divers descend with the help of a weighted sled and ascend by inflating a lift bag to speed their return to the surface. By 1999, she had set a women's world record, and a year later she surpassed her own mark. Her controlled technique, composure under pressure, and dedication placed her among the sport's very best. In October 2002, Tanya Streeter had just set a 160-meter no-limits record, and Audrey was determined to push further. On October 4th, during a practice dive, she reached 166 meters, already beyond Streeter's depth. Plans were made for a 171-meter attempt to take place just over a week later. On the day of the dive, Audrey descended rapidly, clinging to her sled, enduring pressures that compressed her lungs to the size of oranges and slowed her heart rate dramatically. At the bottom, she was meant to open the valve on a small air tank to inflate the lift bag, beginning the swift ascent to the surface. Instead, she found the tank empty. Without the expected buoyancy, her rise was drastically slowed, complicated further by a strong current and a riser rope that was not fully vertical. A safety diver reached her and attempted to inflate the bag using his own air supply, but the lift remained insufficient to propel her quickly upward. The dive, intended to last roughly 3 minutes, stretched beyond 8.5 minutes. Audrey lost consciousness before reaching the surface. Her husband, diving with scuba gear, ultimately brought her up, but crucial minutes had already passed. On the surface, she still had a pulse, but with no doctor present and limited medical equipment available, attempts to revive her were delayed and unsuccessful. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The aftermath was as controversial as it was sorrowful. The diving community questioned the safety preparations for the attempt, pointing to the shortage of safety divers, lack of immediate medical support, and the failure to verify the air tank's contents before the dive. The event had originally been scheduled for a later date, and some claimed it was rushed with inadequate resources. Responsibility for checking the equipment became a source of dispute, and criticism focused heavily on Ferreras, who had overseen the setup and restricted others from inspecting the lift bag tank. While the death was officially ruled an accident, the absence of certain standard safety measures fueled speculation, division, and lasting debate. Audrey Mestre's death shocked the freediving world, not only because of the loss of a record-breaking athlete, but also because of the uncomfortable spotlight it cast on the sport's extreme risks and its culture of pushing physical limits. In the years that followed, her story would be told in articles, books, and documentaries as a way to cherish her memory, but also as a cautionary reminder of the consequences when preparation, safety, and oversight fall short in high-risk pursuits. On a sun-baked August afternoon, the white expanse of the Bonneville Salt Flats was alive with the unmistakable energy of Speed Week. Engines roared, heat shimmered in the distance, and the horizon seemed to stretch into infinity. A perfect stage for a man like Chris Raschke. For more than a decade, he had been a fixture here, a driver, teammate, and trusted figure in the rarefied world of land speed racing. On this day, he was once again behind the wheel of the Speed Demon 3 Streamliner, prepared to push toward the limits of human daring. Something devastating happened instead. Chris, 60, was far more than a driver chasing numbers on a speedometer. For 13 years, he had been an integral part of the Speed Demon racing team, known for both his precision on the track and his steady presence off it. Away from the salt, he served as Director of Sales and Marketing for Automotive Racing Products, ARP, a California-based manufacturer whose high-performance fasteners are trusted across top-tier motorsports, from NASCAR and NHRA to Formula One. Those who knew him in racing circles spoke of his deep mechanical knowledge, calm under pressure, and a determination that earned the respect of crews and competitors alike. Speed Week is a celebration of racing, a gathering of engineers and daredevils who come from around the world to chase records on the perfectly flat salt crust. On August 3rd, 2025, the event was in full swing, with runs scheduled throughout the day and conditions that seemed ideal. Chris's target was a record-setting run in the Speed Demon 3, a machine purpose-built for maximum velocity in the piston engine wheel-driven class. Shortly after 3 p.m., Chris launched his run. The streamliner sliced across the salt. By the time he passed the 2.5-mile mark, Chris was traveling at approximately 280 miles per hour. Then, in a split second, the run unraveled. Something went wrong, and the vehicle veered violently across the salt. What had moments earlier been a precise, controlled effort became a catastrophic crash. Emergency responders were at his side almost immediately. Medical teams began life-saving efforts on the salt itself, working with urgency under the afternoon sun. But the force of the crash had been severe, and despite their efforts, Chris was pronounced dead at the scene. No other participants or bystanders were injured. The announcement of his death rippled quickly across the Bonneville pits. Bonneville Nationals, Inc., the organizing body for Speed Week, confirmed the details and stated that the cause of the accident would be investigated. The Speed Demon team released a brief statement expressing deep grief and asking for privacy for Chris's family. For those who had raced alongside him or shared long days tuning engines, Chris's passing was more than the loss of a skilled driver. He was a colleague who gave generously of his time, a teammate who understood that records were won not just by speed, but by preparation, patience, and mutual trust. His work with ARP connected him to nearly every major form of motorsport, yet the Bonneville Salt Flats were where his passion was most visible, where he combined technical mastery with the singular courage it takes to drive at such extraordinary speeds. Speed Week resumed in the days following, but for many the tone had shifted. In remembering Chris Raschke, fellow competitors spoke of a man who understood those risks, but met them with skill, humility, and determination. John Rhodes Cobb was a man driven by speed and ambition, a figure whose name was synonymous with daring record-breaking feats. Throughout his life, he sought to push the limits of what was possible, both on land and on water. In 1952, at the age of 52, Cobb embarked on one final fateful attempt that would etch his name into history, but not for the reasons he had hoped. Born on December 2, 1899 in Esher, Surrey, John was the son of Florence and Rhodes Cobb, a wealthy fur broker in London. Growing up near the famous Brooklands motor racing track, he developed a fascination with fast machines from an early age. Educated at Eton College and Trinity Hall, Cambridge, he followed his father into business, eventually becoming managing director of several companies in the fur trade. Yet it was his passion for high-speed racing that defined his life. In 1924, John obtained a Royal Aero Club aviator's certificate, flying a Sopwith Grasshopper, and his skills as a pilot would later complement his racing career. His racing achievements began in earnest in 1925 with a victory in a 10-liter Fiat. Over the next decade, he earned a reputation at Brooklands for breaking lap records, notably in a 10.5-liter Delage, and later with his own custom-built 24-liter Napier Railton. In 1938 and 1939, he broke the world land speed record twice at the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, reaching speeds of 350 miles per hour and then 369 miles per hour. His crowning achievement came in 1947, when he set a new record of 394.19 miles per hour, briefly hitting 403 miles per hour on one run, a feat that earned him the press title, the fastest man alive. His records remained unbroken until 1963. After dominating on land, John shifted his ambition to water speed. He commissioned a jet-powered speedboat called Crusader, built in just 7 months. The craft was constructed from plywood and high-quality aluminum and designed to challenge the world water speed record, then held by American Stanley Sayers at 178.4 miles per hour. In late August 1952, John arrived at Loch Ness in Scotland, where he intended to reclaim the record for Britain. Initial trials were hindered by rough weather and challenging water conditions. John made several test runs, reaching speeds of 100 and 140 miles per hour, but the boat struggled to get onto its sponsons, a critical factor for stability at high speeds. Even then, an artificial ripple was created by a following speedboat to help Crusader gain speed during trials. Despite the difficulties, on September 19th, John made his first official attempt. Strong crosswinds prevented a record-breaking run, though he achieved an average speed of 173 miles per hour, just shy of the existing record. Undeterred, he prepared for a second attempt. On September 29th, conditions were reported as well-nigh perfect. Thousands gathered on the shores of Loch Ness to witness the event. John piloted Crusader along the measured mile, pushing the speedboat beyond 200 miles per hour, significantly faster than the standing record. However, just before reaching the second timekeeper's hut, the boat suddenly began to bounce alarmingly. The oscillations rapidly intensified until the boat somersaulted and disintegrated in a cloud of spray and debris. The loch, nearly 700 feet deep at that point, swallowed the wreckage. John, who was wearing a life jacket, was thrown violently from the wreckage and landed some 50 yards from the destroyed Crusader. Rescue boats quickly arrived and his body was recovered from the surface. Despite immediate efforts, John was pronounced dead at the scene. A post-mortem later confirmed his death had been instantaneous. The designer of Crusader, Reed Railton, after studying crash footage, concluded that unrestricted oscillations in the boat had caused a loss of control, leading to the fatal accident. Contrary to some initial speculation blaming rogue waves or water conditions, observers reported no significant waves, only a slight ripple on the loch's surface. The tragedy deeply affected those present and the local community. John's wife, Margaret, who had witnessed the attempt from the shore, was quickly taken from the scene and left Scotland for London later that day. A funeral service was held in Inverness with notable attendees, including Reed Railton and local dignitaries. Nicholas Mevelly was a man driven by an unyielding passion for the ocean and the thrill of pushing human limits. A fearless spirit, he had quickly risen through the ranks of the competitive freediving world, earning respect and admiration from peers around the globe. In late 2013, at one of the sport's most challenging venues, Nick prepared to test his strength and skill against the depths, and then tragedy struck. Nick was born in Dunedin, Florida, and grew up near the water, developing an early affinity for diving and the ocean. As a child, he would spend his trips to the Florida Keys, spearfishing and diving for lobsters. Known by family and friends as a free spirit, Nick combined a deep connection to the water with a relentless drive. While he worked professionally in New York as a prop technician in the television and film industry, his true passion lay beneath the surface. He had been competing in freediving since 2012, a relatively short time, but rapidly ascended to the top ranks of the sport. Nick set several American records and won titles internationally, including first place at the Deja Blue competition and a silver medal in Greece's Ada Depth World Championship. Freediving is an extreme sport, requiring athletes to dive deep underwater on a single breath, without the aid of scuba gear or fins. Nick's journey with freediving was marked by remarkable achievements and near misses. Just a year prior, he had suffered a blackout during a dive and sustained a major lung squeeze, experiences he openly reflected on with honesty and resolve. His blog detailed how these challenges taught him to respect the power of the water and the unforgiving nature of the sport. Yet he remained undeterred, fueled by a relentless ambition to push his limits. At Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas, regarded as the world's deepest seawater sinkhole at over 200 meters deep, Nick was competing to break the American record in the constant no-fins CNF category. On November 17, 2013, he descended to a depth of 72 meters, approximately 236 feet in this challenging discipline, where divers must rely solely on strength and breath control. After reaching his target depth, Nick began his ascent, but shortly after surfacing, he experienced difficulty breathing and lost consciousness, a moment captured in a photograph showing visible distress just before he collapsed. Rescue teams acted quickly, pulling him from the water and administering emergency medical care. Despite their efforts, including resuscitation attempts lasting 90 minutes, Nick was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at Vid Sims Memorial Health Center. A post-mortem revealed his death was related to the extreme physiological stresses freediving imposes on the body, including potential lung trauma and shallow water blackout. Vertical Blue, the 9-day international competition hosting 56 divers from 21 countries vying for a $20,000 prize, was immediately canceled. Friends, family, and fellow athletes mourned deeply, describing him as a kind-hearted, passionate, and driven individual who inspired many with his dedication. He was remembered not only for his extraordinary athletic talent, but also for his generosity and warmth, frequently volunteering to support local communities around the competition site. In death, Nick Mevelly left behind a legacy of courage, determination, and humanity. His untimely passing highlighted the inherent dangers of freediving and the fine line athletes walk between triumph and tragedy. On a warm July evening in 2014, a determined young pilot prepared to complete an extraordinary journey that had captured the hopes of his family and supporters around the world. At just 17 years old, Haris Suleiman was poised to make history as the youngest pilot to fly around the globe in a single-engine aircraft. His mission was both a personal achievement and a heartfelt effort to raise funds for education in Pakistan's poorest communities. But on the final leg of this ambitious quest, something went tragically wrong. Haris was born and raised in Plainfield, Indiana, in a Pakistani-American family with deep roots in aviation. From an early age, flying was a shared passion between Haris and his father, Babar. Babar, an experienced pilot with over a decade of flying under his belt, had been mentoring Haris since he was 8 years old, nurturing the boy's skills and love for the skies. While Babar had originally aspired to join the Pakistan Air Force but did not pass the medical fitness test, he pursued engineering and later migrated to the United States, where he built a life for his family in Indiana. The Suleimans settled into their community, and Babar rekindled his passion for flying in the early 2000s, obtaining a private pilot license and purchasing a plane that would eventually become central to their record-setting journey. Haris, inspired by his father's example, earned his private pilot's license at 17, logging some 50 hours of flight time before setting out on the challenging 30-day, 26,500-mile circumnavigation attempt. Their goal was to raise $1 million for the Citizens Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to building schools and educating Pakistan's most underprivileged children. Along the way, the father and son duo documented their journey extensively on social media and blogs, sharing their experiences from various countries, including warm receptions in their native Pakistan. Despite minor logistical challenges, such as rerouting their flight from Kiribati due to fuel shortages, the pair remained steadfast, driven by their mission and the hope of inspiring others. On July 23, 2014, as the journey neared its conclusion, Haris and Babar departed Pago Pago International Airport in American Samoa, bound for Hawaii on what was to be the final leg before returning home to Indiana. Pre-flight checks were completed and weather conditions appeared favorable. However, witnesses reported that shortly after takeoff, the plane failed to gain altitude, instead veering right and descending rapidly into the ocean. The precise cause of the crash remains unknown. Haris's body was recovered in the hours following the accident, but Babar and the wreckage of their Hawker Beechcraft Bonanza, a 36 aircraft, were never found. Despite extensive search and rescue efforts by the U.S. Coast Guard, the operation was eventually called off after several days without further discoveries. The impact of the tragedy rippled deeply through the Suleiman family, their community in Indiana, and supporters worldwide. The loss was particularly poignant given the altruistic nature of the mission and the bond between father and son. The pair had undergone survival training to prepare for emergencies, yet nothing could have prevented the tragedy. The world recognized their courage and dedication. Pakistan's government posthumously awarded Babar and Haris the Sitara-e-Imtiaz, one of the country's highest civilian honors, acknowledging their commitment to education and public service. Donations to their cause surged, ultimately exceeding $3.1 million, more than triple their original goal. These funds facilitated the construction of 2 new school campuses in Pakistan and supported scholarship programs for students in Haris's hometown. Their story has inspired many beyond their immediate circle. Media outlets and public figures in both Pakistan and the United States commemorated their efforts, highlighting the young pilot's inspiring spirit and his father's unwavering support. Though their lives were cut short, Haris and Babar Suleiman's vision endures, reminding the world of the power of hope, family, and the drive to make a difference through courage and compassion.